Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Shea Anything podcast. This is Doug Williams and Andy Martino with you on this special Tuesday edition. We had the holiday weekend. Hope everybody had a safe and happy Labor Day weekend. Andy, did you have a good weekend?
Doug, thank you for asking. I did have a nice weekend. I did a Mets pre and post, which is always like the most fun I have at this network. No offense to you. It'd be really fun if you were part of it even, but doing it with Gary is fun. The prep that goes into that is a blast. So it was a working holiday weekend, but fun work. What did you do?
It was nice the way you framed that. This show, here's a show that I like, doing more than the one that you host, but it would be nice if you hosted it.
Well, the truth is,
you framed it as a compliment. That was well done.
Yeah, I didn't want to hurt your feelings, but I ended up handling it pretty sloppily, actually. But let's just keep going.
Okay, let's just go on with the podcast. Since we last spoke, 3-2. That doesn't really tell the whole story. The Mets are 3-2. They got the win against the Yankees, and then the split with the Phillies, and it really felt like they needed more than that. And especially when you come back from that deficit on Monday, that then becomes a game you have to win. Like if they had lost that game 6-2 and they never had the lead, okay, fine. Like you were never in it, whatever. But really felt like one they needed to have, Andy. So how big do you think this series was? Keith, in our last episode, called it Waterloo. He was like, this is everything. This series will tell the Mets and their fans everything about whether they can make a run. How big do you think it was that they did not end up winning the series?
You know what's funny is I bet you if Keith had heard a commentator say that when he was a player, he would have hated it. And players always downplay that exact kind of rhetoric and give you the one day at a time stuff and all that. So it's funny that Keith has gone so far over to our side that he would say something like that. I don't know. Look, I think it's all obviously crucially important mathematically. I don't think the Mets are out of it by any stretch. They're tangled up with mediocrity like the Giants, the Brewers, the Marlins, to grab an 8 seed or what have you, 7 or 8 seed if they can. I don't think that they put themselves in an insurmountable hole by splitting the series against the Phillies. I don't think that I don't think it's over. I guess I didn't consider it a must win.
Yeah, I think that's therein lies kind of both sides of this conversation. Was it a huge 4-game series against a division rival? Yes. Would it have told you a lot if they had won 3 out of 4 or swept the Phillies? Yes. Did the Phillies look at times terrible in the series and look like a team that could be taken advantage of? Yes. Does it mean the Mets aren't going to make the playoffs? No. And I'm not sure when anything will happen where we're like, yeah, the Mets have no chance. It may be on September 25th. It may be on September 15th. I don't know. But right. The Mets aren't even close to mathematically eliminated, and they aren't really out of the conversation at all. So I don't want to frame this conversation like that. But, Andy, that actually leads us to our next segment, which is Hold Me Back. You know, Jeff, our producer, always reaches out and sees if we want to participate in these segments. And the closest thing that I can give you today of an opinion where you're going to have to talk me off the ledge is exactly part of your last answer. You're like, well, you know, the Mets are right there with the Brewers and the Marlins and the Giants. And I'm like, what? The Mets have to make the playoffs this year. I don't know what I mean by that, whether it means...
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. So here's what I'm trying to figure out. Does that mean Luis Rojas is only in the job 1 year if they don't?
Oh, come on.
Does that mean I'm just throwing this out there, okay?
How could you even throw it out there? They found such a special manager. You're going to talk about that, you hot take.
Okay. Look, Andy, I'm not saying these things are facts. I'm just talking something through here. Picture me on a couch in a therapist's office, okay?
I will.
Does that mean Brody? Forget about the ownership situation, the fact that Steve Cohen's probably going to be the owner and he may not have a role anyway. But does that mean that Brody, even if ownership wasn't changing, deserves for this to be his final year and deserves to be let go? Does that mean roster overhaul? Meaning Jacob deGrom's safe. Nobody else is. Like, if the Mets don't make the playoffs in a year where 8 teams in the National League do, and they seemingly have every roster advantage over the Giants and the Marlins, what happens then? Because that would tell you so much. It was handed to you, and you didn't take advantage of it.
Well, look, I think it'll have very little bearing on what happens with the franchise, one way or the other, because of a few factors. Because of the ownership change is an enormous change anyway that carries all of its own implications that we haven't even begun to figure out yet. And that'll be bigger than whether they squeak in on an 8 seed or something this year. And the pandemic economy in baseball will mean a different offseason than we've ever seen before, one way or another. So much harder to predict than usual. So I don't think it has that much of bearing on what happens next. Doug, I understand your point where if a GM takes over 2 years ago and goes into an aggressive win now mode and misses the playoffs 2 years, one of which was expanded playoffs, that's not what you're trying to do as a franchise. But you look at it another way. What did they go? Brody's first year, they went, I think, from 78 to 86 wins. Maybe I'm off by a game or two on both. I'm just doing that by memory. So they made a big step forward last year from where they were the previous year. Edwin Diaz had been half of himself. The Mets make the playoffs last year. This year they lose Syndergaard and Stroman hardly before they're even out of the gate. And at that point, you're pretty much just screwed with your pitching. So I don't know that either year. Well, I don't know that this year's a fair referendum on much in baseball because of how strange it is. So I don't know. I just think you don't blow anything up because of what happens this year. You might blow it up because of other reasons or not. But so I guess I'm not seeing a way in which I agree with you about the Mets having to make the playoffs this year. Maybe as we're talking this through.
I was thinking as you were talking, it would be nice if this was a 162 game season. Well, for a lot of reasons, but one of them being that if you're Brody and let's say in a regular season, the Mets won 88 games, you'd be able to say, see, there's continued growth. Now they might win 30 and there's really no way to do the math there because everything's different. I mean, you're playing 7-inning doubleheaders and there's just so much that's different. But I guess, Andy, it comes from the season starting, watching the Giants and Dodgers play early in the season, being like, wow, the Giants they're not trying to win right now. They're not fielding a big league team, watching the Dodgers beat them. Mm-hmm. And so you start to form opinions about teams. You watch the Mets, you see how much effort Brody and the front office have put into building this team to win now. And I just don't, there are going to be teams in the postseason, if it ended right now, especially, who had no intention of being there. They would tell you after a couple drinks off the record that they were like, wow, postseason caught us by surprise. The Mets thought they'd be in. There's no chance. After a couple drinks off the record, Brody would say, we absolutely thought we'd be a playoff team, especially in the circumstance. That's all I'm saying. You built your team to be there. And if you're not there, then some sort of drastic change may be coming. I'm not advocating for it, but that's just my point.
To me, once you lose Syndergaard and Stroman, you're no longer in win now mode. It's just circumstances have happened. You're looking at a deck of cards and you got a bad hand. That was a terrible mixed metaphor, proving my expertise in poker. You look at the cards in your hand and you say that they're not good. That's what I'm trying to say. And that's it. They lost the 2 starters that they were kind of relying on. So I don't know if at that point you can get a true evaluation.
What about the injuries that the Braves have overcome? What about?
Yeah, that's even better.
I mean, I'm just saying that if you're a win now team and you lose a couple pieces, it doesn't turn your organization's philosophy around. It doesn't mean that you're building for the future. It means that you built for now and the wheels fell off.
Well, the Braves are just better than the Mets. I mean, the Mets don't have anyone like a Ronald Acuna. They don't have anyone like Max Fried, who's now on the IL. Well, other than DeGrom, but they didn't have a number 2 to fall back on like Fried. He's now on the IL. And by the way, if Fried doesn't come back, I'm sorry, but the Braves are pretty cooked. Ultimately, I'm not sure how much they're going to be able to overcome all this. The Mets don't have a Freddie Freeman. The Braves are just better. So I guess there's a lot of variables. You're absolutely right. The Mets would deserve more credit for overcoming if they can overcome these injuries. And the roster's flawed in many ways. They have a lot of players who don't have a position. They have players doubled up on positions. They don't have a center fielder. Catching's been a mess. There's a lot to criticize about the way that the roster's been constructed, for sure. It's far from perfect. I'm just saying, if this conversation started with some needing what needs to happen this year, I would say I don't know that I can go quite there with all the different factors that are involved. Plus, again, the takeover of new ownership and the evaluation of Brody and his baseball ops through that is going to go deeper than did you sneak into the playoffs or not, I would imagine. It's going to be a more holistic look at how he's done and is he the guy going forward and all that. Well,
yeah. And I think the evaluation of Brody in the circumstance that you're talking about is, you have to look at Jed Lowry. You have to look at how Edwin Diaz and Robinson Cano have performed, which in 2020 right now is well. There are a lot of facets to it, but I think that you would come down harsher on him than you would Luis Rojas. And I mentioned his name earlier, so I should circle back to it. I am very impressed by him. I continue to be. And I think that he, from our perspective and vantage point, is a very good spokesman for the organization, which is such a big part of what a manager in 2020 is. And for the fans out there that think he doesn't seem like he gets fired up, or he doesn't have a lot of conviction behind his decisions, or what we see is not that important.
Who says he doesn't have conviction behind his decisions? Who says that?
Well, I think there's an idea out there that he doesn't have a feel for the game, and he doesn't come out after games and say well, so-and-so, deserve to be pulled, or stand behind his decisions. And I just think at the same time, what we hear from managers is really important and also means absolutely nothing. Does that make any sense to you?
I'm surprised to hear you say that, because Luis Rojas is as critical of his players as I've seen a manager in New York on the record ever over the last decade or so, Mets or Yankees. I think he really he pushes it with how much he'll go after some of his guys, but he does it in such a measured way. It's so analytical that it's almost not offensive, but you're like, man, he just scorched Amed Rosario. Wow. But he does it in a way that he's slices and dices them so analytically that you're you don't even notice it's happening. But I think I almost no criticisms of this guy. Mickey Callaway would make a decision in game by the seat of his pants and not be able to defend it. And every move Rojas makes, he can defend with rationality. I'm not sure what fans are looking for. I'm surprised to hear you say that someone's reacted negatively to him, because I just think it's so glaringly obvious that he's special.
I think, well, first of all, I agree with you. I've seen enough to think that he should continue to be the manager. And that doesn't sound like as much of an endorsement as it really is for me. I was skeptical because I didn't know anything about him, and I'm really impressed. I think the common criticism of managers in 2020 is the criticism of Luis Rojas, that he lacks the feel. And when you make a bad move, or you pull a pitcher too early and Seth Lugo only gives you 3 innings when, he wasn't at the pitch count that you thought he could be at, fans are like, what are you doing? Watch the game. He looked great. But that's a common criticism just because of the way baseball is in today's day and age. And it's not personal to Rojas. And I think he possesses every skill necessary.
Yeah, feel. He's got a better feel for the game than anyone who might be levying that critique, myself included. This guy, there's a script to how to manage a game, and he knows how to follow it. And he also knows that you can pull a Seth Lugo after 3 innings when he's good, or you can pull him after 4 1/3 when he's gotten bad, when they're starting to hit him. They have the data on when guys start to get hit hard, and obviously you manage now to get them out first. And sometimes that can be problematic. That's a whole other discussion. And sometimes it's too much, but I haven't seen him as a quick trigger guy. He obviously doesn't have a whole lot of pitching, so he's got to be pretty careful about leaving these guys in. I mean, Lugo is the wrong example probably because he's got good stuff and was just stretching out. But you got to get a David Peterson out of here before they start to whack him around. I mean, we're not talking about a bunch of Walter Johnsons here.
Yeah. All right, let's do 3 batter rule. You mentioned that the Mets don't have a Freddie Freeman. Conforto has been that guy for them, consistent. At times early in the season, the power numbers weren't there. The hit in Miami, the home run in Miami was such a big hit. And that was always my criticism for him, that I couldn't remember the biggest Conforto moment, that sometimes in big games and big at-bats, he wasn't there. He has been, and he's just been rock solid. Do you think that he has taken as big of a step as kind of the storyline goes?
Sure. He's having a phenomenal year. Some of the defensive plays he's making on Sunday in the first inning, I believe it was, that basket catch kind of thing he made on running toward the wall, which the Mets ended up winning in a blowout, but the game could have gone the other way if he hadn't made that catch. And then, of course, his offensive approach. I would say, 91% of our broadcasts this year on TV are Keith talking about how Conforto is going the other way now. And he's right. I mean, that's been a huge he basically just now will try to make sure that he doesn't chase, try to make sure that he doesn't get too pull happy, doesn't worry about hitting home runs. He's hitting the ball to left field so much, I think at a clip beyond what almost anybody in the league is doing. But he still pulls it when he has to. He's obviously getting his home runs. Just a complete player who absolutely, if he kept this up, Doug, year in and year out, he is a Freddie Freeman type hitter, no question. So, he just a phenomenal year. You really can't argue with his year other than I think his numbers with runners in scoring position, like much of the team, aren't great. But he is just one of the top players in the league. He'll be in the MVP conversation. He won't win the MVP, but he'll be in the fringes of that conversation this year.
Yeah, and I like doing the 3 batter rules because sometimes when you speak as positively about a player as you did just now about Conforto, you're like, it's puzzling because it's like, why aren't the Mets better? Why isn't their lineup really, really hard to face every night? Because Dom Smith is like a star now. He's a guy, as you like to say. Conforto's there. Alonso's been a little bit better of late. McNeil is getting hot. Like, why does this feel like a team that other teams really don't want to face? A lineup that is deep. And it just, I don't know. It just has not felt that way. And the runners in scoring position has been better. It's climbing back up. It's leveling off. I don't know.
They may be rounding into form as an offense at the right time. They might, in a week, they might be that team, Doug, that you're saying, why aren't they, as an offense? Because it seems like I think one of the things that's really helped a guy like Alonso is that clearly the issue's been one of pressing, perhaps confidence. Try to get inside other people's heads, but chasing is something we can say objectively is true. And he's been getting big home runs even when the quality of at-bats hasn't been good. So you'd have to think that would help his spirits as he tries to, even when he hit that walk-off, he wasn't really playing well. He just had a great swing at the right time. And he hits 2 home runs on Sunday. So, as the quality of his at-bats improves, he's smiling more. It seems like he's having more fun. It's not hard to imagine him getting dangerous in a hurry because he's good. Doesn't seem thrilled about DHing, but he's just going to have to deal with that. And McNeil, just the quality of the contact is better. The hard contact is better. Power is starting to come. So you have the potential now for some of these guys to just be themselves again. It's the talent evens out over a 162 game season, not over a 60 game season necessarily, but perhaps over the final 20 or so, some of these guys are going to look like themselves finally.
Yep. That's exactly what I was just thinking. If only they had the luxury of a normal July, August, and September, or, as we usually call it, the stretch run. Now it's like 2 weeks.
But I would say, before we go to the other one, very quickly, when you say why aren't the Mets better, I just go back in my mind to because they don't have Syndergaard and Stroman.
Yeah,
it's so huge and easily forgotten.
It would be the only thing, Andy, is that we're a podcast. We do 2 episodes a week, about a half hour. We can't just start and end every podcast with, oh, the Mets lost yesterday. Why? Because they don't have Syndergaard and Stroman.
Well, that would be a lot more efficient, and we could get more done with our day if that was every episode.
That's true.
So,
That's something to think about. Second of the 3 batter rule. Andres Gimenez.
Yeah.
Is he Ray Ordonez with more pop? I mean, he is so good defensively that he's becoming like treat to watch level. And the conversation is no bigger than that, Andy. I'm not trying to bench Ahmed Rosario or trade him, but Gimenez has become the type of player that I look forward to watching. And that transcends any of the other hot take conversations we could have. I just think, look, you have a guy.
Athleticism is very entertaining. When people are quick and agile and do spectacular things with their bodies, it's fun to watch. And it doesn't happen that often in baseball. So I agree with you. It is fun. It's a sight to see when somebody's that good of a middle infielder. And I'm just interested to see a couple months into next year, if he's playing every day, how's he hitting? Because that'll tell the story. Once all those rounds of adjustments have come around, video will be more of a thing next year. Because it's access to it in game is limited by the pandemic rules. So let's see if Rosario can stay ahead of, if Gimenez can stay ahead of the adjustments that the league would theoretically make to him offensively, and can he be an everyday player in the big leagues offensively long term? There's some things that show promise. There was a small moment on in the game Sunday where he had a first pitch changeup from Aaron Nola, who analytically speaking has one of the best changeups in all of baseball. He didn't execute the pitch perfectly. It caught a little bit of plate, but Gimenez just first pitch, rookie, just waited back on the changeup, knows that Nola throws a first pitch changeup sometimes, hit it up the middle for a base hit. Right there. So he certainly has a chance up there as a hitter too.
Did people think he was going to be like really not a great offensive player? Like, did scouts think like 200 hitter level defensive replacement, or were they not sure?
Yeah. Until the fall league, when he won the batting title last year, turned some heads. He was pretty far off the radar as a prospect, because you just figure he's a glove guy. And if you're not really hitting in Double-A, you're probably not gonna make it. So maybe you come up and you can be a utility guy, like a Luis Guillorme type billing or something. Although obviously Guillorme's had a good offensive year, but you know what I mean. The way we've looked at Guillorme over the past couple of years. So Gimenez didn't have any buzz, hardly at all, externally to the organization as a prospect, because he just wasn't hitting at that level. So what we're seeing now is beyond what we thought we would see. This happens sometimes. Jeff McNeil did not have the kind of minor league career that suggested he would be an elite hitter. He was hurt a lot, but still, when he wasn't hurt, he didn't career to suggest that until his very last year in the minor leagues. Sometimes weird stuff just happens, and it lasts.
I honestly, I never know what to believe about Mets prospects, because we heard Pete Alonso was flawed in a lot of different ways, and he may very well be, but he comes up and he wins Rookie of the Year. Jeff McNeil, you're so right, came up when he was a little bit older because people said he could hit. I thought he was going to be TJ Rivera and like be a contact hitter, but not necessarily a guy who would stay in your lineup or stick around. So it's just important to keep watching. So
sometimes people can surprise you. It's kind of fun when that does happen.
Yeah. Last one is Edwin Diaz, Andy. So I'm looking at his stats the other day.
Aren't they shockingly good?
Okay. Why is this? Because the last time you and I spoke about him, you were like, I think we've learned enough. Yeah. And then I'm on Baseball Reference on like Thursday or Friday, and I'm like, ERA 2.25. Okay. Strikeouts per 19. Okay. Is this some sort of like weird upside down world where like this is what could have happened? No, these are his stats. And I think it's because he's been bad with inherited runners, and he's let in some runs that have started on second base in extras that aren't earned.
Mm-hmm.
But so do you feel any differently? Like,
No.
to say that you're
okay.
Go ahead.
So I that's a good point. It's an interesting point that you brought up the inherited runners, because a reliever's ERA often doesn't tell the story about how he does when he comes into a situation. Obviously, as you know, not a good measure of a reliever. Although I will say 2-something is better than 6-something. So that is an improvement for Edwin. So many of those great numbers were accumulated when he went to lower leverage spots. So I think he can be a very, very good 7th inning guy for the Mets for years to come, and a great closer in Kansas City.
Okay. Well,
look, he's so good that I could be wrong. He might overcome this mental block that he seems to have about succeeding too many days in a row. But like what game did he pitch over the weekend sometime? He comes in, he gets the first 2 field strikes him out, walks the next 3 guys. It was Saturday. He ends up throwing 26 pitches. He gets the save, but it's like, what happened between batter 2 and batter 3? And even that was a successful appearance, got out of it. And there's just too much weirdness going on.
Yeah, when he threw 2 innings, he apparently it's just so interesting. Like, he hadn't pitched multiple innings in so long, like started an inning and come out for 2.
Yeah.
So I think that there's this conversation with him and Luis Rojas that's like, I'm trying some new things here. And I wonder if, his new role and potentially using him as a multi-inning guy or using him in the 8th or the 7th or the 9th, he's going to come in big spots because Seth Lugo's in the rotation. But I just wonder if he's being used as this kind of Swiss Army knife that takes the pressure off of him just coming into games with close leads that a closer does. I think you're right.
Yeah.
He can go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm agreeing with you. That seems like the way to handle him is to take him out of that traditional closer spot, like by the book, and throw him into other situations that are important, but maybe not like exactly like that. Because, this stuff is just otherworldly when he's on. When he gets out of whack, he's obviously borderline non-competitive. So the trick is to just seemingly keep his head right. I didn't like, by the way, recently he said, like, well, I'm not going to make any excuses, but I didn't have a lot of time to get ready. That's a no-no. That's throwing the manager or the pitching coach under the bus.
And it's an excuse.
Yeah. So that was weak. But anyway.
Absence of access, Andy. Normal day. Who are you talking to today?
Well, the number one answer, honestly, all year is Dom Smith, because what's going on with him deserves to be a story with so many follow-ups and the conversations that he's having with his teammates and whatnot. But to give you a fresher answer, I would say Robinson Cano, just because this guy's so good still, just so freaking good at baseball and so many facets. And, I don't feel like Cano's ever been given his due for being as heady of a high IQ baseball player with as much to say about it as he has. We just saw a little bit of it when Pete Alonso was talking about it over the weekend, but look at him. He's so good defensively at his age, and his range has declined significantly by the analytics I've been told about. And, you can see it too. But the numbers prove it. But he makes up for a lot of it, not only by the shifting that the team does, but with his instincts. He knows how to read swings. He knows batters. And he knows pitchers. He's like, if DeGrom's going to throw a slider away to Alec Bohm, I'm going to take 3 steps over this way. Like, he's got that incredible feel that makes up for some of the range decline. He's got like some of the best hands you've ever seen. He just knows, he puts it all together with his IQ. Just such a smart baseball player. And that can exist with a player having a PED history as well. Like, Alex Rodriguez is a smart baseball player. You wouldn't know it if you listened to him on TV, but he actually was a smart baseball player who used steroids. And so Cano, it's not like, oh, he's good, he must be juicing. So those are kind of 2 separate issues. He's got that history, but also he's staying good in part because he's so smart about the game. And I just love watching him play. I'm just enjoying the day in and day out of like, I get to watch Robinson Cano play every day again. And he's just such a special player. So I want to talk to him about, dear Robinson, you have a second to talk about why you're so special.
First of all, I was about to say, totally agree with you. I love watching Robinson Cano hit. I love watching him play. Always have. But you're just going to go up to him and be like, Robinson, you're so amazing. How do you do the things you do?
I'll do. Like, remember when you had that home run? It's awesome. That's how. No, but I wanted to talk to him. He's not really on the record so much about like how do you position. I've talked to Gary DiSarcina about how great he is with positioning and trying to help Rosario with it too and stuff like that. He knows hitters, he knows swings. With the Yankees, he was like the guy that didn't run to first. With the Mariners, he was like the guy who plays in Seattle. Who cares? With the Mets, he's like the guy Brody shouldn't have traded for. When does he get to be the guy who's really smart and shares his thoughts about baseball?
That's a good angle. Yeah, I like that. All right, everybody. Well, this has been a special Tuesday edition of the Shea Anything podcast. We'll be back on Thursday, as usual, with Keith Hernandez. Have a good week, everybody. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review if you can. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate it, as always. Andy appears to want a last word.
On Thursday, could you ask Keith how he feels about defensive shifting? It's a hot topic issue these days, and I don't know where he stands on it.
Yeah, I don't know. He's not on the record on that, so I'll ask him, and we'll talk about that. And we'll be back in a couple days. Thanks, everybody.